So welcome to episode 49, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. The shortest way to succeed is to learn from those people who've already been there and done that. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are so blessed to have one of my favorite people here today, Ron Peckham. Hi, Ron.
Hey, Sue. How are you?
I am great. Ron has the title of Aviation Practice Advisor, and he is with CNS Companies. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Ron. I've known him for quite a few years now. And he is really what I would consider a gifted leader. For example, he has worked in the aviation segment for 35 years and grew that practice from 9 people to 15. Is that right, Ron?
150.
150 people. And from $10 million to $100 million per year. That takes true leadership. And he has, for the last 4 years, been coaching and mentoring and training folks. So he knows not just about how to lead and grow the organizations, but how to build that foundation of truly people who are understand and committed to a vision and common purpose. Let me just tell you a little bit about CNS Company. They are a national organization, and they are focused on design, construction, energy performance contracting, and operations. So really quite a wide spectrum of things they're doing. And I know that they are really seen also as leaders out there in the industry. So Ron, we are going to talk today about leadership in a time of disruption. And I know there's a lot of disruption happening, but it's kind of exciting disruption because we have so many things that are changing that seem to be blending to create this sea change where how we work together is changing. And some of it's because there's new technologies that allow this. But I also see a lot of people not coming to construction so much anymore, and even engineering. So we're not really a destination place anymore. So that's disrupting things. So there's a lot of disruption going on. So tell us a little bit about, first, your journey for becoming this advisor now in CNS.
Well, my technical training was as a civil engineer. And while I was in school, I had the good fortune of being there during the Vietnam War. And so consequently, I won the draft lottery, which really started my 20-year relationship with the military that kick-started a passion for leadership and how important and essential it was really for everything in life. So the first 10 years of my career, I focused on infrastructure and utility projects, water, sewer, pumping stations, treatment plants, steam lines. And because it was a fairly small organization, I had the privilege and opportunity to not only be in charge of the design of those projects, but actually go out in the field and be the lead construction manager to live with the mistakes that we had made in the office and to understand what it would take to be a better designer. It was a great opportunity for learning and to ground my career. But life happens while you make other plans, and everything changes. And if you are curious about leadership and engaged in leadership, you soon have opportunities for positions of increasing responsibility. And so it was with me throughout the 45 years in my career to have positions of increasing leadership opportunity, culminating with becoming the CEO and chairman of the board of the CNS companies.
So going back to what we were talking about just before you were sharing about your journey, I thought a couple things were important in what you said. How important do you think it is that a designer actually experiences construction in order to be a good designer? Because I saw that was part of your path.
I think it's essential, and it's not an opportunity that everyone has. But if folks building their career have the opportunity, I strongly represent it. I had the good fortune of working for a partner who was not only our construction lead engineer, but had also been in the construction corps during World War II and building ports in the Philippines. And he taught me early in my career that you're not building a watch in the field, that things happen, and you have to have a sense for how to be results oriented and come up with a standard of quality that meets the expectation of the owner while being constructible by the builder. And I think that when you leave the sterile world and used to be of a drafting room or design room, and today it's a screen with a 3D model, when you leave that very idealistic place and then you go to the field to see what you're trying to do and to understand what the challenges are working in a built environment, it really makes you a much better designer and leader.
So I'm curious to know too from you, you grew your company from 10 million to 100 million. That is quite a feat. What would you say is the secret to being able to do that?
Well, for CNS and its culture, it's all about team. We have many mantras in the evolution of the company, but they all revolve around a core message that at CNS we're part of a team, and that no one can get it done alone, that by having a vision where we get buy-in and alignment and everybody can pull hard on the rope in one direction, that the results can be quite dramatic and quite successful.
That's exciting. So I'm sure that you are seeing all these changes that are happening in the industry and all segments. It's a sea change. So what do you think about leadership in a time where there is a lot of disruption?
Well, I think that for leaders who want to be their best self in this environment, I would share three things to consider. First of all is to make friends with reality. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "This time, like all times, is a very good one if we but know what to do with them." And so as the change and disruption comes, if we can make friends with it, it doesn't feel quite as threatening, and we can dance with that change. And we know that when change comes, there's usually churn, and where there's churn, there's opportunity. And so we may be kind of blinded by the impact of the change, but pushing through, there's always an opportunity in disruptive change. And so I would encourage leaders, as they make friends with the reality, if possible, reframe that challenge into an opportunity, because I'm pretty sure that it's there. The second piece that I would encourage folks to think about is to remind yourself what leadership is all about. And there's two key things in my mind about leadership and whether it's disruptive times or not. The first is to make meaning for yourself and then for others who are counting on you to lead forward. And the second is really very simple, to get from here to there and wherever you are to wherever you want to be. And that can be in shifting marketplace expectations. That can be in evolving your business model, in changing your delivery method. It can be in introducing or leveraging a new technology, or in significant team changes. But the reality is you have to remind yourself that people are looking to you as a leader to make sense of the disruption and to help them get from here to there.
That makes a lot of sense.
The third piece that I would share is which really came to me late in my leadership career, and that is to consider building your progress on a foundation of gratitude. Disruption usually comes with fear of loss, and it's either experienced or potential or both. And what we notice from looking at living systems is when they become afraid, they become still and small and tense and immobile. And that is not a helpful stance for a leader who's facing disruptive change. And so while the loss may be real, the blessings that you have in spite of the disruption will encourage you and embolden you to do what is necessary as a leader, whether it's personally or professionally. So what I've noticed is that adopting an attitude of gratitude is really an antidote for the paralysis that comes from fear of the change and the churn, and it gets you active and head up and fully engaged and creative because you know you have the safety net of the blessings that are not changing to fall back on. And so that gives you a sense of inner peace to be able to move forward and do what you need to do.
It seems to me that if you don't embody some level of gratitude, or at least look at what's going well, what's right, what your strengths are, your brain is not going to be able to allow you to do what you said in the first thing, which was to look for the change and the churning as being opportunities. You won't be able to see it.
Yes. You know, we talk a lot about in today's business world about bandwidth, and it's usually about how we're going to transmit data or models or information. But the same is true with us. If we're spending intellectual bandwidth on worrying and fretting, we don't have that bandwidth that is available for being creative. Because if you look at the psychology of creativity, it almost always is at a deeper level than emotion. So when we build on a foundation or springboard of gratitude, we're able to move forward and free up more of our intellectual capacity to be our best leader in disruptive times.
That's exciting. So something for everybody out there in Construction Nation to be thinking about today is, what is your attitude of gratitude today? What are you grateful for? And tell some people about it. And then see what you can create. That'll be awesome. I can't wait to hear what people come up with. So what disruptions are you seeing?
Well, there are so many, but the three that I'd like to talk briefly about is first the disruption of project delivery and the evolution of that model. Sooner or later, all things become new again, and what I notice is that in my career, we're returning back to the master builder delivery. Design, bid, build is still a mainstay in the public arena, especially on the East Coast where things may not be quite as progressive as they are in California. But the progressive design, build, construction management at risk, other methods, the addition of financing and operating and maintenance systems like design, build, own and maintain, like other P3 financing, they really are turning our paradigms, challenging our paradigms, and really testing our assumptions as key members of the built environment and delivering those systems. So one of the first things I notice is we have to ask ourselves, who are we working for? Who are we working with? And what will the key stakeholders judge success to be? And we can't just assume that as these delivery models change, that our stance and our interaction would stay the same. The second thing that I notice is that technology systems are changing at an ever-increasing rate. And although there are lots of claims, oftentimes the different communication and information management systems don't play well together. And although they're intended to be seamless, they often create more silos of information. And sometimes, for example, in our experience, the document manager system really doesn't doesn't play well with the quantity or pay item manager, and doesn't play well with the plan markup software, and that doesn't play well with the photo documentation software. And so there's a discontinuity with those. And as communication expectations in our business continue to come up to want information in real time, every disconnect or every discontinuity is a problem. And we end up spending a lot of time trying to explain why there are silos, why there are discontinuities, and why we can't give folks the information, because most people we work for have a Krispy Kreme mentality. They want it hot, fresh now. And when they don't get that information hot, fresh now, they have a lot of expectations.
I also see a lot where they have that expectation because they were sold. I can't tell how many times I've been told they were sold that this would all work together. And then when the team struggles, they either have to reconcile that maybe they were sold something that doesn't work quite like it was supposed to, or they judge the team as somehow not using it properly.
Yes. So the new reality is all about a one unified three-dimensional model that is information rich, and it goes from concept to construction to asset management as seamlessly as possible. And we're making great progress towards that, but the disruption can be do all the parts and pieces that are intended for the project. Will they play well together, or are they creating other silos? The third and final thing that I notice is that specialization and competition in the marketplace is increasing. Expectations are increasing quite high. When I first started my career, if we were competing with other firms, we could name the other 4 or 5 firms that we were going to compete with on one hand, because they generally were from one part of the state. And I called it the sandbox theory. And you knew the other 4 firms that were in your sandbox, and you just had to be better than the other kids in the sandbox. But what's changed with the World Wide Web is the sandbox is now worldwide. And so when someone is looking for web-enabled knowledge or specialization or expertise, they go to the world and pick out who they wish. So it's like the whole world has come into your sandbox now. So it's not being better than the other 4 kids in the sandbox. You have to be among the best of the best to deliver what the expectations are. And so the old standard of care, the expectations of the old standard of care is what would a reasonable provider do in this situation is really evolved to what does perfection look like? What is the best of the best in the world? What would they provide, regardless of whether they're in your locale or in your price range or not? So those 3 areas I see as items that those of us in the built environment will have to deal with: project delivery, evolution, technology systems, and specialization and its resulting competition.
Yeah, right on. I see all of those myself, and all of them changing pretty rapidly. So what is your best advice to Construction Nation on how to lead when things are happening and changing so quickly?
Well, I think it comes back to the leader's stance. I think that we have a basic choice in life. We're either going to create the future or we're going to live in the past. And that stance really informs everything that we bring to the table each day. What I noticed, Sue, is the amazing changes that folks like you and John Martin and Jeff Newmeyer have done in changing project delivery in a spirit of partnering to make the project delivery more sensible and a higher level of quality and engagement. And so clearly that's an example of people who have decided to create the future, and I want you to know how much I admire that from afar on the other coast. I think we have to stay curious and flexible and agile as we lead. Because this is not a time to be leadened in our stance. We have to notice what's coming at us and decide how we are going to dance with it. I think systems are good. We've talked about technology, but people are better. And if you have to invest in something, I would vote that the investment in your team and its teamwork, alignment, and energy is probably would trump the investment in the system. And finally, to remember in the face of disruptive change that courage is not the absence of fear, it's being able to move forward in spite of the fear. We all, as leaders in disruptive time, are intimidated by one thing or another, and it's about breathing deeply and saying, okay, what are the options, and let's move forward boldly.
Wow, that sounds, I wish we could package that. Send it off somewhere to everybody. So what do you think is your strength as a leader?
I wonder about whether my greatest strength is an authentic caring for others. I had an experience in sixth grade, which I didn't expect. My sixth grade science teacher wrote in my yearbook, when helping others up the hill of life, we always find ourselves closer to the top. And as a sixth grader, that wisdom kind of passed over the top of me for many years. But as I began to think about the wisdom of the stance that communicated, and also just as an engineer, this is an occupational hazard, the physics of when you help someone up the hill of life, you actually are going up the hill because you're reaching back and giving them a handhold and pulling them up over the next obstacle. And so I think that authentically caring for the folks around you and on your team does a lot of things for a leader in the face of disruption. I think it shortens the distance between the leader and the follower. I think that they can feel that you actually do care about what they're doing and that they want to give their best. Now, it also makes the space safe for full expression. And when you hear their best ideas, I believe that you're going to move faster. The old African proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so when you create a safe space for people to express themselves, you go farther together. I think it's that trust that empowers a full engagement, and I think that caring and wanting the best for them personally and their team resonates with them. Now, I just want to say here, before people think I'm really getting really soft and mushy, that authenticity means caring enough to deliver tough love. That when you're authentic with your team, it doesn't mean it's group therapy and that you're going to wink at items of accountability. It means that you care enough about them that you are going to enforce individual responsibility so you can get the synergy of team. And so when people know that you're authentic, that you're fair, that you respect them, but that this is business and we do intend to build something, and it probably involves public safety, and this is not a time to wink at accountability, then they understand the responsibilities of the freedom you've given them and their ability to perform. And I really believe that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that's the foundation of the relationship between a leader and a follower.
That sounds very insightful, and I know you've learned it over many, many years working with many people. I'm also curious to know, I'm sure not everything always went exactly as you had planned, and that you've had your fair share of challenges, some big, some small, but take us back to maybe the biggest challenge you faced, and what was it that you did? Take us back to that worst moment and tell us what was happening and what you did, what you learned from it, how that helped shape you as a leader.
Well, I will share briefly two, one personal and one business, one professional and one business. I spent 10 years working for my first firm, and my mentor there was grooming and training me for leadership of the firm. But what happened, I was not prepared for. He got sick, and he left the workplace never to return again. And I stayed because I'm a focused guy. I stayed on the trajectory that he had laid out for me without realizing that the system had changed. the human and organizational system, which he was a key part of, have changed. And so what I wasn't wise enough at that young age to understand is that the remaining partners didn't support the plan that Randy had laid out. So after I had a wake-up call in which the remaining partners, after a period of time, told me that they had made a judgment that I was so offensive to people that I might not be allowed out of the office to interact with clients. And that was really a wake-up call for me. And so I left the company and I joined CNS, which was a similar consulting firm on the other side of the same parking lot, worked in the same industry, in the same town, but on one side of the parking lot, I was seen as part of the problem. And on the other side of the parking lot, I was seen as part of the solution. And so what I learned from that is it wasn't that the old firm was bad and I was good. It was we were different. And the fit wasn't good. And the chemistry wasn't good. And so I would say to folks who are listening, if you're in an organization and the fit isn't right, then you probably need to change it. And if you have leverage to change your own organization, I recommend you try. And if you don't have leverage to change your own organization, then I recommend you change your organization to move forward. Second thing I learned was if you don't have a mentor, just recognize you're flying blind. I was too young to recognize that. I recognized I had a plan and I had a trajectory, but my mentor wasn't there. And it was like getting an instrument rating on a plane. You've got a hood over the cockpit and you're really flying blind from the outside. And finally, if your system changes, so this is about being alert to your environment. If your system changes and you ignore it, you do so at your own peril. So the final piece was I learned, given the advice that they gave me about my people skills, I believe you're never as good or as bad as people say you are. And if you have courage, you apply the same figure skating judgment contest judgments, and that is you throw out the low mark, which is really easy to do. You throw out the high mark, which is much harder to do, but you look at the body of evidence of how you're doing and whether you're on track to be a leader in disruptive times. That's
great. It just so reminds me, too, of how important it is to really look at fit, not, for yourself and for your team. It's so kind of heart-wrenching to see people on a team where they could excel somewhere else, but they're like just in a muck of mired down and not succeeding and don't know what to do just because of this like intangible thing called fit. To me, it's really about culture and values.
Yeah, I've lived the challenge that when we're deeply engaged and we're committed to being down in the day-to-day living or challenges, it's sometimes difficult to remember we need to pull up to a higher elevation and look down on that and saying, what do I notice about this situation? As opposed to just struggling against the weight and the challenge, come up to a higher elevation and notice what you notice. Now, a mentor can really help you with that because they're really not focused on skills. They're focused on life approaches. And they can say, so what do you notice about the situation you're in? And what would it take to change that? So I'm a big proponent of mentoring.
That's awesome. I am too. Coaches, mentors, essential. So what's the very best advice that you have ever gotten?
What's the very best advice I've ever gotten? I guess just not take yourself too seriously. If for those of us who are fully engaged, sometimes we can just get really intense. And having a sense of humor about what we are about and being able to laugh at our own mistakes is really important to keep us humble, to keep us flexible, to shorten the distance between us and those around us who are depending on that, and to keep the atmosphere safe.
Cool. So we ask everyone to give us a little gift that would be a resource that you have found very effective for you, or that you think would be very helpful to those of us in Construction Nation?
So what I would encourage folks to think about is that you can't lead anyone else until you can lead yourself. And you can't lead yourself until you have spent some time thinking about what's important. And so my gift to the listeners of this podcast would be to think about 4 important questions of life, and to spend some time thinking about it and getting clear about them as a springboard for success in leading others. And the first is, who am I? Who am I really? And second would be, why am I here? Why am I here, personally and professionally? A third would be, whom shall I serve? Whom shall I serve? And the final is, how much is enough? How much is enough? And with the final question, we often think that in very worldly terms of money and position, etc. But it goes to relationship, love, health, engagement, peace of mind. It can mean so many more things beyond the way the world keeps score. And I would encourage people to spend some time with those 4 questions, and I think their path will become more clear. One of my mentors has told me that clarity rises. And so in this digital world, we get too accustomed to flicking a switch and having the screen come on or the website come on or whatever. But really, in our purpose in life, it's more analog. It's more like looking through the lens of a single lens reflex camera and dialing in the focus. And so we see what we hope for in a fuzzy way, and then we rotate the lens and it becomes ever more clear. And it only becomes more clear if we're willing to invest the time to actually think about it and to consider what we're going to do with this precious gift called life.
And my experience also is that that's the only place you really find true joy and fulfillment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely so.
So how can Construction Nation get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, or they can email me at rpeckham@cscos.com. That's RPECKHAM @cscos.com. Or they can text me at 315-430-6111. And I'm more millennial than I am baby boomer, and so probably the latter is the best way to connect with me.
Okay, cool. I'll make sure we put that in the show notes for you. So what is your parting advice for us, Ron? I really have appreciated all the great wisdom you've given us. What's some parting things that we could maybe start doing today?
Well, circling back, when we face the opportunity of leading in disruptive times, the choice is ours. Will we choose to create the future, or will we live in the past and fight against the change that is inevitable? And I've always admired the wisdom of General Eric Shinseki, who said, if you dislike change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And so if we want to be relevant, then we have to make friends with change.
Amen to that. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for being on Construction Dream Team. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Sue. It's been my privilege to spend time with you. And as I said, I just admire the work that you're doing to be agile with the change in the industry and always be focused on moving ahead in a positive way. Thanks for all you do, Sue Dyer.
Thank you so much, Ron. I appreciate you. Okay, episode number 49 is one to send to everyone on your team, because who doesn't need this type of wisdom? Or just remember who we are and what we're doing. And are we doing what we're supposed to be doing Is it filling our heart? Are we doing what we need to do to create a future? Are we creating the future that we want? I think all of these things we all need to look at. Maybe this is a once a year episode. You need to revisit it every Thanksgiving and think about, what am I going to do this year? What am I going to do next year? But remember that Construction Dream Team is always here, and we drop on Monday mornings at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So join me next week when I'll interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so you can help build your construction dream team. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for joining us today. Thank you again, Ron. You're great. Appreciate you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Sue.
Take care, everybody. Catch you next week.